Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel and Happy New Year. In this episode we will be doing these glow-in-the-dark fabulous party gloves, and it's the first time I'm doing gloves, so I had to do a little bit of research where there's this one designer from Russia called Rosa, and she literally tapes up her whole arm to make a pattern. And after finding this picture on Pinterest, I thought, you know what, let's try this out. Let's try this process to make the patterns. So yeah, it was a trial and error, but let's see how that went actually. So I started off by taping each finger on my hand, and then I had to take some scissors along the way to make little slits in order to fold the tape to mold to my finger. So when doing this, I advise you use like a little bit of tape. My tape is very wide with width, so I had to cut it like 3 times in order to like sectionally tape each finger. I also then, after taping each finger, I did a few trims on the ends to smoothen out the top corner of the fingers. Next, you're going to tape in between each finger. It's a little bit tricky, but I believe you'll manage it. Just put 2 tapes on each side in order to have a full coverage. Next, you can go a little wider with your tape and now start taping around your palm area, sealing those little bits to connect the fingers to the palms. Next, we're going to mark around our thumb and then create a seam in order to make that pattern for the thumb. I wanted to put some panels in between the fingers that will meet at the top of the fingers when combined. On the pinky side of the hand, that's where I wanted to allocate the fold. Okay, next, this is when you start labeling. We label the top of the hand and then also the bottom of the hand. I then numbered my fingers from the pinky to the thumb. And then I numbered each panel in between, as in 1 to 2, but on the other side, 2 to 1. That's where they'll meet. So again, 2 to 3, and the other side it will be 3 to 2. And you repeat that for the other fingers. Now you may have noticed how messy the tape is, the paper tape one is. So I went with a clear tape that has way more structure to just neaten up the tapes and to lay them flat. And then I just decided to add the seam where the gloves will end. Next, you're gonna have to be very careful and cut just one seam on the side in order to loosen up the glove to take off. It's a little tricky, but with patience you'll get it out. So before you cut through each panel, just make sure that they are connected, the lines continue and connect with the other panels in between the fingers. So when cutting, it is important to just separate the top from the bottom and the panels from each other. When you cut off the panels, just make sure that they are stuck together while you're sticking onto the pattern paper. When taping down the top and bottom part or panels of the pattern, it is important to make sure that everything is aligned properly. As you can see, my number 4 finger is like so crooked, but I do my best to try and make it align with all the other fingers. And then at the folded area, that's where I connect it as well with the line. So since the folded area was still a little crooked, I decided to part the top and bottom and make a line, then rearrange the fold, making the glove more symmetrical in a way. So during this time, I measured the top and the bottom fingers to just make sure that they kind of have the same size, and I noticed that the bottom pinky finger is more thicker than the top one, so I transferred some of the size, which was probably 1/8, to the top panel of the pinky finger. And then I just repeated this process with the rest of the other fingers. It took some time, but I think you want to measure many times and cut once. With the third pinky, I decided to transfer the extra part onto the panel instead. When transferring to the panel, just make sure it's the correct labeled one. which in this case is 3 to 4. So when rectifying the panels, I decided to just add some ease in comparison to each finger. Next, I added a 1/4 inch seam allowance throughout the whole pattern, and by the wrist 1/2 inch seam allowance. So before adding seam allowance onto the panels, I just measured each finger's length to make sure that the panels match the length of each finger. Then after finalizing each length, I added a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When removing the molding, make sure you transfer the labels onto the pattern. Okay, so now as we move to the thumb pattern, as you can see, it has a different shape compared to the rest of the other patterns. So I had to measure my thumb in order to get the right length. And then add the seam allowance. Then after cutting out the patterns, I decided to do some minimal walking of the pattern just to allocate the little notches and to check if the thumb pattern fits the thumb space. So I chose this yellow neon tulle fabric as my fabric, and I was thinking of doing 2 layers, but I did want a very sheer look, so I decided to go with 1. So I folded the fabric in half, pinned the pattern down, then started cutting the pattern out. So in cutting out the panels, I advise you not to separate the pattern from the fabric, just so you know which panel is for which part of the glove. Okay, so I recorded this part a little slower. Over here we'll be cutting out the peplum, and I just cut out a piece of the fabric according to like the length that I'm looking for when it comes to the peplum of the glove. So with that row of fabric, the fabric is already folded in half, so I folded it again, another half, and I separated it, and then I cut the little fold. So I took that 1/2 and then I folded again to the left, and then I folded upwards again, and then I put a little pin and then cut a tiny circle in the center at the point of that fabric. Then I cut the hem of that fabric as a circle, just like how you would do a circle skirt. And then you cut a straight line to create the ruffle we want for the hem of our glove. You will then repeat this process for the other glove. Okay, so now we're off to the sewing part. Now it's very important to make sure that the pattern is nearby in order for you to use it like a map. I tell you, the moment you unpin your pattern from the fabric, you kind of lose like which finger is which finger. So just by having the pattern next to you, you can always bring it to the glove to reference the part of the fingers, just like what I'm doing right now. So after you have been certain like what position your glove is in, you start grabbing one fabric at a time with its pattern, and you start pinning it towards the areas that were labeled, and then you sew it 1/4 of an inch. Once satisfied with its positioning, you may repeat the process with the other fingers. Okay, so once you're done sewing the panels onto the pattern, you then fold by the pinky finger and then pin the panels to the other part of the hand pattern, and sew at 1/4 of an inch. After sewing that section, you'll have the semi-completed gloves looking somewhat like this. And next, you'll just have to add the final panel on the one end to complete the 4 fingers. And then we'll just close by the wrist and sew in the thumb pattern. Next. So it was getting a little dark in my working area, so I'm playing around with different lightings, so apologies if you can't see some details. I'm still learning my camera, but other than that, I hope you can just see the process and you get an understanding of what we're doing. Before we sew on the thumb pattern, we first have to sew the sides together. And then we're going to trim a little bit of the seam allowance until it can be this small. Perhaps you have a better way of binding it, but I really wanted to get rid of the extra fabric that's been sewn. Okay, I'm sure you can see I'm starting to get frustrated with the lighting because I'm trying to show you the difference. When you cut off the extra fabrics, it's more sheer and you get to see more of the structure of the glove. And that's how it looks on. And next we're going to add the thumb. We're going to sew on the thumb. So when prepping the ruffle, we're going to sew 2 ruffles together by the seam. Ideally, a French seam would look very cute. If you want to know how to sew a French seam on tulle, you may click the link above this video of another tutorial I made long ago. So now I am sewing a base stitch by the top edge of the ruffle. In order to gather to create the perky ruffle. And then you pin and sew on the ruffle onto the hem of the glove. So I ended up with a glove like this. It looks a little bit too short compared to the picture. I wish I went a little longer at the hem. And this is how it looks in the dark with the glow-in-the-dark UV light. And then I also added some jewelry, some sparkly jewelry to see how it would shine in the dark. Let's say you're at a party or something. So I think it looks cute. Other than that, I wish I changed the proportions and maybe used a serge, a narrow serge to seam each hem. So if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe to your girl's channel and like, as well as here are some videos I think you might enjoy. Thank you. Till next time. Bye.